Good evening, and welcome to Hearts and Heels. We're super excited that you are joining us tonight as we share and have a special guest. I am one of your hosts, Shay Robinson. I want you to follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, follow us on all those places at Hearts and Heels #1. And remember, you can always go back and review the sessions live on Facebook and those places. But thank you so much for just joining us. I'm excited to have the co-host in the studio. Hey, Yolanda.
Hey, Shay, how are you tonight?
Well.
All right. Well, we have a great topic tonight, and that is very dear to me, and I'm sure it's going to be dear to a lot of you all. We have our guest tonight in the studio, Jannah Bailey. She is the Director of Child Protect and also the Montgomery Public School System. She is the District 5 board member, but she's also celebrating tonight, actually on tomorrow, her 20th year at being the Director of Child Protect. So we want to say happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. 20 years.
And thank you for coming on and being a part of Hearts and Heels. I actually discovered you on a website. You spoke out one day at the board meeting, and I was like, I got to talk to her. I got to commend her for stepping up. So I want to say thank you for your service to our children, not only with MPS, but our children through the state of Alabama. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shay.
Yes.
So listen, I'm having some issues over here, but we're gonna get it right in a few minutes, right?
Yes. Well, I do want to say thank you. I've known Jana for a long time. She's done a lot of great work in the community, and I'm excited that you're on the board. Definitely sharing with us and letting us know what's happening. But I do want to ask you a few questions. And my first question is, being a board member and knowing all the things that's been happening with COVID and the children, from your perspective, what has been the success of this year?
Well, I don't know that we're going to be able to measure the success until the kids get back into school on a regular basis, until they get back face to face. And so we can measure what happened this past year, because we are a year into the virtual. So I think it's going to be a challenge to measure that. But I also think that we need to realize that the report card is going to look a lot different than it has in years past. Just because we know that children that were already volatile, and they were already at high risk, and they were already maybe struggling in school. Anyway, the pandemic just magnified that. It also magnified the inequalities of our schools, and not just in Montgomery or in Alabama, but throughout the country. The inequalities, particularly with Black and brown children, that they tend to struggle anyway. And this just kind of magnified and also opened up what is really going on with our school systems. And so I think that it's not just going to be here, but throughout the country, we're going to see that things where, children just didn't learn at the same rate that they were learning when they're face to face, because socialization, as we know, particularly with the younger children, is as important as the academic part. And they are the ones that probably will show the least amount of learning.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things that I was thinking about this year. Like, how are we going to measure this success, and what is it going to look like? Because there have been so many disparities. And speaking of that press conference that Yolanda said she heard you at, one of the things that I know you talked about during that was the importance of recognizing that the children were going through so much, that the children were being impacted more than just education, that's really important. But there are also other things. For example, the home life. So
So
speak
speak
to
to
that
that
if
if
you
you
would.
would.
Like,
Like,
what?
what?
Why
Why
are
are
you
you
so
so
passionate
passionate
to
to
make
make
that
that
statement?
statement?
Well, because it at Child Protect and for me, everything is integrated because I don't just serve the kids that come into Child Protect because they are the kids that are at MPS. So it's all the same children, although we don't see obviously the same amount of children. But we know that this past year with the pandemic, that children, and I speak to those that are at or below poverty level, that already were very vulnerable, that already were at high risk, that they experienced not getting food on a regular basis because we know that kids, a lot of the children, the only meals they get are the breakfast and lunch Monday through Friday at the schools. And so that was a challenge. Also, we know that a lot of parents were having to stay home with children. A lot of parents maybe lost their jobs, and they were already at high risk, like I said, anyway. And we know that even now that we still don't have the tools, that all the children in the system do not have the tools yet, the tablets that I'm talking about, in order to do the virtual school. And a lot of them were challenged, as much as the superintendent, who has done a stellar job. I will just tell you that she and her team have just really rallied around and thought outside the box and done the best they can. However, they're limited on what they can do as well. So getting internet into the homes, making sure, I mean, I have grandkids, and I have an 8-year-old grandson in second grade. And, I can't imagine keeping him in front of a computer for 4 hours at a time. And so, and I read to a couple of classes during Dr. Seuss week, and they were bouncing all over, and, because it was elementary school kids. So we all have experienced, even if you were in the best home situation, we all have experienced that stress of the pandemic. I haven't seen my son, who's in the Army, in a year and a half because of travel restrictions. And so, it's made me sad. And then, you compound that with all the other things that the children and the families and everybody has had to go through. So and I can kind of go right into that. We went on lockdown last March, and the kids went home, and, they were we were all isolated in our homes because it was the very beginning. I think we did 2 forensic interviews in a month between March and April last year. May 1st, when things started kind of opening back up, where, it was okay to maybe go into a little family reunion, we saw a 40% increase from May 1st to June 15th last year. And that was because children were not back in school, but they were around other adults. Teachers are our biggest reporters. And so because they see kids 9 months out of the year, and they see them 8 to 3 every day, and they can notice changes. They can notice marks on them. They can notice when they're absent, all of these things. So we rely on teachers to be those reporters of children that are abused and neglected. And so all of that was taken out. And when I speak to this is not just Montgomery, but this is a national issue now. We saw an increase of severe physical abuse of children, and children that were witness to domestic violence. And, it stemmed from a lot of stress already, that we were just all kind of pushed over the edge with that. And we've seen some really sad cases too. And our numbers are usually, we see, when school goes back in August, we kind of see a peak of reports, and then, it kind of levels off, and then kids go home for Christmas and we see it drop. And then they come back in January and we see it spike again. So you imagine, kids being out for months that they have been. And you just wonder too, how many are not getting reported because they're not around mandatory reporters, and people maybe don't want to get involved, and they're not noticing. And so, there's just been a lot that has impacted these kids over the last year.
Do you think it's because you mentioned the stress level? Parents are stressed, the students are stressed. Parents have not been trained, as we could say, to be educators in a sense. Do you think it's trying to get the child to understand the subject area, or the parent not able to understand what the child needs?
It's probably a combination of both. And I think depending on the age of the child as well. But it's also, it's not even just the subject matter, but it's like you and I sitting here, we can do this for an hour, but probably by the end of an hour, you and I both are going to need to get up and walk around.
Well, for me, it's going to be 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I'm not a good sitter, But you think about it, and I have gone into the schools and I've seen how these teachers are just doing tremendous jobs virtually, as best they can, because they may have 22 kids in the class and maybe 15 or 16 are showing up on a regular basis. And, they're doing their best to monitor those, to report absenteeism. But it could be a number of things, it could be that mom's, not getting the kids up, or mom had to be at work at 6 o'clock and left the kids to get up on their own, or left older kids to get up. And so it's impacted everything. And so we're all, I say it's a community issue, because we're all going to experience what these kids have gone through eventually.
Exactly. And the aftermath of the pandemic, as well as grades as well, trying to keep them abreast. Well, what are some signs that are being reported for child neglect, child abuse? And you mentioned that some reports are brought in, or many of those reports are brought in by the teacher. Tell us what type of reports are being brought in, because we can sometimes, our children, like I was kind of clumsy, and we can fall and hurt ourselves, and not, it could be not what we think it is. So give me some examples of that. What you perceive.
Well, our law, it has 4 different types of abuse: sexual, physical, neglect, and emotional abuse. Of course, some things under there, if child was, if there was drugs, if they were put in danger of that, if they were witnesses to murder, or any, there were victims in a vicarious victim, where they have experienced a traumatic event, but they may not have actually been touched, but they may have witnessed a younger sibling being abused. So there's a myriad of different types of abuse, subs. But most of the cases that we see at Child Protect are sex abuse cases. About 70% of what we see is child sex abuse. And so the signs are usually, you notice a change in behavior, you notice inappropriate behavior, that a child may be scared of a male or a female, or maybe very drawn and inappropriate behavior towards that adult. Their language is not appropriate. And like I said, the grades. And so a lot of times with sex abuse, it's hard to see anything physically. But when you're around a teacher, you may start noticing different signs that a child, I like to give examples, but we had several years ago, a little girl, I think she was 4th or 5th grade, and she, making good grades and going along. And her mom married over Christmas break. And if she had known this man, her mom's boyfriend, but when they came back from Christmas break, the teacher started noticing a change. And before spring break, she disclosed to a teacher that she had been abused by her stepfather. And so that teacher, saw her every day. And so it was easy to kind of say something's going on, So the physical abuse and neglect are probably the easiest ones, because there's usually an outward appearance. Like you said, with falling down, if a child comes in and their shins and knees are skin up, or their elbows are skin up, that's, you can kind of look at it and tell. But it's when marks are on their face, or, when you can see an actual handprint or a belt buckle, or marks on their necks or their backs, or if they wear long sleeve shirts and pants consistently, and it's 97 degrees outside. So those are signs that we can notice with a child. And another example is this teacher. Once again, it was a little boy in 3rd grade, and she started noticing a pattern of him being absent a lot on Mondays and Tuesdays, sometimes Wednesdays, but mostly Mondays and Tuesdays. And so after several weeks, she asked him, what was going on. And his father, 9 times out of 10, was getting drunk on the weekends and beating him. And the father knew enough to keep the child home because children, their bruises and scrapes, they heal very quickly or quicker than we do as we get older. And so the teacher had enough wherewithal to notice the absenteeism was a pattern. And so that was what was happening is he was being abused either Friday or Saturday and being kept home until it was just enough to maybe like, well, it may look like a bruise on his face, but maybe not enough to where the teacher felt enough to report it at that time.
How soon do
Wow.
you go into investigation of finding out the abuser? Uh, how soon is that? Once the teacher reports that, how soon do the child get removed from that situation?
Well, and if you've noticed, there's never a straight answer to anything
Right.
that we do at Child
Right.
Protect. So we'll just use a teacher as an example. So a child comes to her and let's say this child is 10 and said it's a Friday afternoon and said, I'm supposed to go to my grandparents this afternoon, but I don't want to because when I go, this is what grandfather does to me. So that would be considered that child is going into imminent danger. Maybe the grandfather's picking them up from school. So the DHR is called, and then DHR notifies law enforcement, and they call us and they say, we're picking the child up from school and we're bringing them right to Child Protect. But if the child says, last summer when we went on vacation, family reunion to Michigan, and my cousin did this to me, we would just set up an interview whenever it was convenient for law enforcement and DHR because the child is not in imminent danger. We do have, we're on call 24/7 because as you can imagine, abuse does not happen 8 to 5 and it does not take holidays off. So, we had 3 emergencies last week, and emergencies are, like I said, when a child is in imminent danger. So, we get a call at 2 in the morning, and law enforcement or DHR has called us and said, we have a child that's they have been sexually abused, or we have a child that just witnessed a shooting. All of these things, and they need a child statement. Maybe that child is the only one that's seen this before they can move further, or maybe they've arrested someone. They need a someone who actually saw it to be able to say it before they can keep them in jail. So a lot of things go into it. I have to give a shout out to Abraham and Kristen and Michelle and Keisha. I hope y'all are listening, but they are really the stars of Child Protect. They're the ones that are on the front lines, and we all go in. I'm not saying that, but they are really the ones that keep the wheel turning. And I can tell you that the children that come in at 2 in the morning on a Friday night, Saturday morning, they get the same service that they get at Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. in the morning. And I think that is something that is so important when families are coming in, that they are welcomed and not judged, and they are embraced, and they're listened to, and everyone is there as a team in order to make sure that all the services are given to them.
No, that's a beautiful. I do know Kristen, so shout out to Kristen. You do have some great staff there,
Awesome.
and you talked about a lot of different things, and you talked about a lot of different cases when it comes to Child Protect. Because I don't even think, as much as I know about the organization and know about Blue Ribbon, I don't think I ever looked at Child Protect as all of those things. Tell me, how did Blue Ribbon Month get started?
Okay, well, Blue Ribbon Month was started in the late 70s, early 80s. I can't remember the exact date. And it was actually a grandmother who started it. She had witnessed her grandson beaten several times until he was beaten to death.
Mm.
And she started Blue Ribbon Month because of the black and blue marks that were left on him. And so that's how April became, Blue Ribbon Month. And then it was, designated, and then, everything else followed. The Children's Advocacy Centers were actually started in Madison County, which is Huntsville, by Bud Kramer, who went on to be a congressman. He started the National Children's Alliance when he was in Washington, but he was a prosecutor in the late 70s, early 80s. And this is when the mandatory law came out, and as he was prosecuting child abuse cases, particularly child sex abuse cases, he was losing most of them because an 8-year-old child would get on the stand, and before the trial, the child would have told a teacher, a counselor, DHR, the police, a lawyer, all of these different people. And you know that if I was to tell you both, today what I had for breakfast, y'all are going to hear the same thing. But tonight, when if I went out with friends and they said, "What'd you have for breakfast?" naturally, I'm not going to say things in the same order, and I'm going to leave something out or add to it. We're not lying, but that's how we talk about things and how we tell stories.
Right.
So when the child would get on the witness stand, the defense attorney had enough to prove reasonable doubt because it looked like the child was lying. Well, you told the police that you had red shorts on, but then you told your counselor you thought you had purple shorts on. So you're probably lying about everything. So Bud Kramer had the concept that there needed to be a neutral, child-friendly, non-threatening, standalone, nonprofit facility, agency, where the child could be brought and trained staff, forensic interviewers could talk to the child about what happened. And so that concept now is international. So the movement is relatively new when you think about it. Child Protect was incorporated in November of 1989, which, it still is evolving. I mean, there's still things that we can do better, and still we're learning all the time about the forensic interviews. So it brought it to the one agency. So we remain neutral, but we can bring the other parties together on our multidisciplinary team, and we can say, okay, well, there's not enough evidence to go to court or to prosecute, but this child still needs counseling. And so we're making sure that that child is served holistically by whatever other services we can bring in and bring to the family. So that's kind of how it all started.
Let's talk about the services. So once you have, I can remember while you were talking, I was thinking about it was partnership with the schools that it was called a safe place. So let's talk about the services. Once you have a child in your care and you are, or there's an investigation going on, what type of services do the child have? Does the child still go to that home school? Are they able to stay in a safe place, safe home, or family takes them in and adopt? How does that work?
Well, once again, every case is different.
Right.
Keisha Favor, who I hope is listening, but she just started, but she was one of the founders of our junior board, which was about 10 years ago. And then we just hired her a couple of weeks ago to be our family advocate. And so she is really just learning the ins and outs. And so yesterday we were eating lunch and she said, "Y'all were not kidding when you said that there is never a boring moment and no day is alike," because it's never like that. And so what happens is, the non-offending caregiver brings the child. So say it's the stepdad and mom does not believe the child. Like she says she's lying, and she's going to support the stepdad. Then maybe a grandmother or an aunt will bring them in. And then DHR decides at that point where the child's going to go so that they, if the child discloses and this disclosure is credible and DHR and law enforcement believe something happened, it's DHR's mandate that they provide a safe place for that child. So it could be that the child goes home with the grandmother. If the offender does not live in the home and mom brings the child will just go back home with the parent. We have seen, sadly, where a mother will bring the child, and then after the child discloses, the mother says it didn't really happen, or find out in the interview that the mother knew all along, and maybe the mother was even helping. And so the mother is arrested that night, and children have to go into foster care. So every single case is very different. And so it's handled different. You can take two similar cases, and then maybe over here this 6-year-old.
One thing.
Yes. And so, this child may have a good foundation, and mom brings them every week for counseling, and this child is getting better and realizing it wasn't their fault, and they're doing better in school, where this child has now been in 4 different foster homes. So it's very hard. And that's why I talk so much about the staff. And
Yeah.
when you said that about, being here 20 years, I remember my first day, and I left home at lunch, and I called my husband. I said, I can't do this. And that was 4 hours into it. And he came home at lunch and he said, you know what? You're not doing this. You were called to this, and God is going to be there with you. And every morning for 20 years, I wake up and I'm like, are you sure you want me to go there again today? And so far, the answer is yes. And I still feel relevant and still feel like that it matters that I show up. But it really is the staff. I mean, I feel like it's such a privilege. And then, some days when it gets really bad, that a child walks in and they just are there on my heart. And so, yeah.
You are definitely providing a wonderful service. I have seen or witnessed where mothers or fathers don't believe the stories that children are sharing about abuse and how that impacts the child. That is one of the things that I know you can't give me an answer, but why is if you don't mind sharing, why is it that some parents just are reserved or don't believe children when they say something? And I know it can be a variety of things, but that's always piqued my interest. When children say something, why aren't we listening? So, and I really don't get it when parents are doing it. So, Jana, just help me out a little bit.
Okay, Shay. So that's probably one of the hardest questions.
I know.
And I'll tell you why, because I am a mother and a grandmother, and you know, I can't believe still my oldest is 35, my youngest will be 32 next week. I still can't
Oh,
believe that God picked me to be these boys' mother. I mean, it's still, I mean, it is like the greatest thing. And now I have these five perfect grandchildren that call me Babby, and I just can't. It's just beyond me to this day. Um, I think there are a lot of reasons. There are women who put a lot of their energy and their livelihood and their all of their stuff into a man, whether it's the biological father and they're married and they've been married for 20 years and they have three kids together, but that is her all. And she would never understand that the father of the children could ever do anything. And then you have, mom's boyfriends or stepdads, and you have all of that. And once again, for some reason, um, the mother just, for whatever reason, cannot put anything before that person. I sometimes say, mother birds take better care of their little birds. They sit on their eggs and they wait until they can fly, before she stops feeding them and everything. And I just don't know. That's one thing that I just don't think I'll ever understand. Fortunately, that's not the majority of mothers, though. You know, most
mm-hmm.
most of the mothers, 99%, they do believe their child and they're there to support them. And but it can be just a whole understanding that we just probably will never know the answer to that.
Listen, this is Yolanda and Shay. We are having this conversation with Jannah Bailey. She is the director of Child Protect, and this is a really important subject that we wanted to share with our listeners. Um, this time, school is almost about to end in May, and so we need to be um, an advocate for our children in the community and at large. So I think that we need to be our eyes and ears for our children. And if it's not your children, for someone else's children, um, just wanted to make sure that we put this information out. We don't talk about these things, but it needs to be talked about.
Yeah, you're
And you're
right.
right.
Yolanda is I can see it in her eyes. She's feeling this tonight because it is really, really true. I mean, I have witnessed a lot of things with children. And of course we see the news. Like if you watch the news, I was just watching something last night on 2020. I love those stories, but there are so many cases about child abuse,
Mhm.
and how children are just being hurt and harmed. And if there are little blessings, then we're supposed to protect and guide them. I'm with you, Jana. Sometimes I look at my kids like, I can't believe God blessed me with these children. But I do want to ask you, what is the rate of cases in Montgomery, and how has that number risen since COVID?
We see, and of course now remember, we can only interview a child if they are verbal, and usually that's about 3, and even that is challenging. So that between 3.5 and 4 is about the youngest that we can interview. But some kids can talk, and
Yes.
so there are some that DHR will get, that will be babies that have been left in hotel rooms, babies that are just found in empty apartments, 2-year-olds that are out just wandering the streets. So DHR, and God bless all of them. I mean, they sometimes get a bad rap, but let me just tell you what, they have tough jobs. They're the ones that respond to the homes and have to go in into those volatile situations. As Montgomery Police Department, sometimes I think that we don't give enough credit, because we don't think about police officers doing this kind of work, serving child abuse victims. And the ones that we have working at our special victims unit here in Montgomery is above and beyond the best. I mean, they're there when you call them, and as is DHR. And so, we don't see that many. We see about 400 children a year, between 325, 375, but we're upwards now for this year. And though that may not sound a lot, when you think about, we have 28,000 kids that are in K through 12, that's a very small percentage. And we don't really know what goes unreported, because of those that are reported, that are investigated, there's at least double that that's not being reported. And usually by the time we
Mm-hmm.
get the report, unless it is, they've witnessed domestic violence or a shooting or something that happened just that one time, this is not the first time that it's happened to them. And so it may be something that's been going on for a while. And for whatever reason, they have a trigger, whatever can happen. And it makes them talk about it, or makes them disclose something that maybe they may not have if they hadn't had that trigger. And then we have adults. We've had cases where a younger cousin has come forward and told about a grandfather. And when the girl disclosed and it got out in the family, we've had 19, 20, 21-year-old older cousins who have said, he did that to me. And so we have brought them in to interview
Mm-hmm.
them. And so you can see how it's gone on for generations. And because maybe grandfather is just this amazing, wonderful man, and he's got this great career, and he's a professional, and he could never do that. And so, the children didn't disclose. I mean, he may have given them a lot of gifts or promised to take them on trips, and all of these things. And I want to say this too, if you were talking about the signs, 96% of children know they're offenders. 96%. So we're really good. I mean, I know I was when my kids were younger. We're very good at talking about stranger danger and about don't take candy from the man in the car. Well, that's only 4%. I'm not saying that we don't need to teach them that, but we also need to say, listen, we're going to this
Mm-hmm.
big family reunion, when people are kind of let loose, and there may be more spirits and more, a lot of things, and around relatives that you're not normally around. And it's important to talk to your children to say, listen, we're going to be around relatives that you haven't met before. I don't want you to be around any of them without somebody else, you and another cousin. And if anything inappropriate happens that makes you feel uncomfortable, I want you to tell me or tell another adult. That's as important, and even more important, because we look at family members, neighbors, babysitters, youth
Mm-hmm.
directors,
Mm-hmm.
just open the newspaper,
Pastors.
everybody,
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And so, like I said, they have a relationship already with this offender, they already have the trust and the love and all of that. And so it's real easy for them to get into this relationship. They're usually threatened. If you tell I'm going to go to prison, I'll never see you again. If you tell I'm going to kill your mother, I mean, some horrible things that these children disclose. And they're afraid they're going to be back into that situation too.
Well, how often do you find help for those older kids? Like you mentioned that the 21-year-old, some of the older ones said it happened to me as well. So what happens to those students or children, young adults?
Young adults, right. We provide counseling. I mean, we don't have a cap on the age of kids being counseled. And it used to be that we just provided counseling for children that had already had a forensic interview. But what we have learned in this pandemic is that there are children out there who are right on the edge and they need mental health services too. And that is one thing that we're not able to provide in the schools, as you know. Now, we did finally get our tax passed, but it's going to be a few years before we realize that. And some of the CARES money, we are going to be able to provide some mental health. But every single school needs a mental health, not counselors that talk to you about where you're going to college, but true mental health.
I was going to ask you about that because I know mental health is on the incline. It's on the increase.
Oh, absolutely.
And how are we as a school district hoping that you can see the trend of students coming in with a lot of mental health issues? What are we doing as a school system maybe to help that? Because I know we need to hire more people.
Oh, absolutely.
Not those like you said, not counselors, but those who specialize in mental health issues.
Exactly. Well, MPS is partnering. Child Protect is one of those partners. Family Sunshine Center is one of those partners where, we had just actually started going into the school, Abraham and Kristen, last year, probably 2 months before the pandemic, because we realized that our clients were not coming back because, mom has to work at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or, she is not able to bring them because there's no transportation. So we're trying to lower or kind of overcome the burdens that families may have getting their kids to a counselor. We do not charge for our counseling services because, in our opinion, we don't want there to be a burden. And that's why we rely so much on our community, who is very generous in helping us with those services. So MPS is partnered. We do know that some of the CARES money that we're going to be able to hire some additional mental health. Hopefully between that and when the property tax, we start realizing that we can have one in every school. And we talk about mental health. I mean, we could go up to any adult that and ask them, during this past year, how many times have you had to just cry your eyes out or talk to someone or just feel like that you just want to run away from it all? Now imagine that you're in a household with younger kids who are used to you being their stability and knowing the answers and all of these things, and you can't answer it anymore. And so they are feeling that stress. I'll tell you, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was going to add to that because I feel like that was one of the elements that we missed this year as a school system, because I felt like it was such an opportunity. I know that we had to get learning in, but this pandemic impacted us all in so many different ways. And I can only speak, I have a 7-year-old, and it has been some really hard moments. Like, he has cried sometimes because he missed his friends. For his birthday, he couldn't have a birthday party. And I know that's minute to, some people losing family, but he's still trying to process this and handle this. And I was really hoping that as a school system, that our focus would be on that mental health component that our children needed. I need it as an adult. It's stressful for me to homeschool, to work full time, to do all the other things that I'm doing. I have to step back and get myself together. So my 7-year-old trying to handle his mental things that's happening because he doesn't understand that what COVID is, and he doesn't understand why he can't go to school, and he can't understand why he can't talk to his friends and what's happening. And I want to go see grandparents. That's a really hard thing to overcome in addition to learning.
Mhm, mhm.
So I do feel like it was so much pressure put on learning, and I'm thinking my son is just surviving. Like he is, he's just waking up. He's just, he's trying to process this place that we're in. He's literally been in the house for a year.
Mhm.
You know,
I do know, and I hear you, Shay. You know, I think that, if this was continuing starting August of 2021, if everything, we would have things better in place. But the superintendent and the central office and the teachers were just like us. I mean, it's like, okay, one day you're in school, okay, y'all
right?
can't come back. And so they have literally, there have been times they have worked around the clock trying to get systems in place and I'm not saying that mental health was not important, because we all realize that, but the schools are there to provide education and learning, and so they really needed, and that is their mission, to get kids up and learning and get, I mean, it took a while to get the virtual stuff because we didn't have that. I mean, none of us knew how to do a Zoom meeting, a year ago, and now we all know how to do
Uh,
them. And so I hear what you're saying.
yes,
I told you about my sons, and in talking with them, they're like, "Mom, what is happening?" And I could explain to them about bad weather, about divorce, about all of these things. I didn't know. Our grandson was 7 last year, so the same age, and he had just been acting out and just this attitude. And I said, let's have a little talk about it. And I just started. I said, tell me, what's going on. And it tears. He just said, I'm scared everybody's going to die. I don't have any friends anymore. I don't know what's going on, and just all of that, and just him talking. And I said, I don't know either. I don't know either, but it's going to be okay. We're stronger than that, but it's not good. And I think just acknowledging to kids and to ourselves that this year sucked. I mean, it's horrible, and we've all experienced it. And we have seen some really, really ugly things, but we've seen some really
mm,
great things come out of this too. And I think that we've just got to be kind. I say that a lot. If everybody was just kind, just be kind to one another, just to
yes,
have a little bit understanding and patience and
hmm,
grace and mercy and all of those for each other, and know that we have experienced. I know y'all have heard of the ACE score, that the child adverse childhood experiences, and so I'll send y'all a copy if you haven't taken it. But there are 10 questions on there. If you've experienced any of these before the age of 18. Now, there's nothing scientific about it, but it's kind of to see, where you are as an adult and what these kids may have experienced. Divorce is one of them, drug use in the home, mental health of parents. I mean, a whole bunch of things. And one of them is, have you experienced any type of worldwide national disaster or anything? Well, let me just tell you, every child under 18 has an A score of 1 because
mm,
of this year. And so we've got to be mindful that some kids are going to come out of it. They're going to be okay. They were talked to. Some kids are not going to be as be able to rebound as those others. They may need other things. It has nothing to do with where they are living, if they're single parent home, if all of those things. They
right,
may they
right.
may be some more challenges, but it's up to who that child has been surrounded with.
Yeah, because like you said, we're all coping. We're all learning to cope. And I do want to ask this question, since I brought us to this place talking about the COVID and how it's impacted. How do we as a community look out for or check on the youth? It's harder if youth are inside for us to see the signs of abuse. So, what do we do as a community? Well, what are some suggestions or some things you would like for us to do to help with protecting our children?
Well, and that is such a good point, because even when they're inside or outside when things are normal. Our law for mandatory reporters is anybody whose profession brings them into contact with children on a daily basis. So by law, a lot of us are not mandatory reporters. Teachers, like I said, they're the ones who report the most. Um, but I believe that we all have a moral obligation to these children. We know that child abuse without intervention, it leads to teen pregnancy, to juvenile delinquency, to drugs, alcohol, bad grades, dropout rates, low, all of these things can be tied back to abuse and neglect if it's not reported and there's no intervention. So if you think, you know what, I haven't seen those little boys that live next door to me, I haven't seen them outside playing basketball in their backyard in a few days. And I've noticed that dad's truck's home. And, I think I'll just call mom or dad or just go knock on the door and just say, hey, just wanted to check on y'all because dad may have lost his job and he may have told mom not to go out of the house and he may be abusing those kids to take out his frustration and he's not allowing them to be out of the house. So there are other signs that we can look for. And if you know of a child that's at risk anyway, is to check on that family. If you know of someone, your church, your neighbor, the people you work with, if one of them has lost their job and financially they're struggling, there are opportunities out there, for food and for other services. And so it's just a matter of, getting them the right place that they need to be right now.
You mentioned, I remember in the recording about making sure these babies are being fed during this pandemic since they had to be at home. So how was that taken care of? How did the school system respond to making sure that the children were being fed, those who did not come to school when they had the option? I think it was a hybrid situation, or maybe when they just went back home and they did virtual learning. How was that?
Well, the schools did, and like I said, I go back to Dr. Moore. They did a very good job of continuing to provide the breakfast and the lunch. The challenge, of course, is getting those meals to the kids, especially when we were at the height of the pandemic, where they did a drive-through. Well, maybe some people couldn't drive through, and so or come up to the schools to get them. So, it tried the best they can, but of course it wasn't perfect. I mean, and of course not every child was able to get the meals. I mean, they were there, but they might not have got to them. And was it even enough? I mean, we know that they couldn't provide hot meals because under law, there's a lot of things that go into refrigeration and how long something can sit out. And so there's so much, I've learned the last 2.5 years, there's so much that goes into feeding kids at school too. It's not like at our house that you're going to sit there and eat that before you get up from the table. And then they're there for 2 hours because they're not going to eat their broccoli, but it's not like that. And so we have seen, and a lot of these kids live in food deserts. So there's not a local grocery store, that parents that have, access to. But there, I could sit here and talk for days about the issues and the challenges and where it seems our leadership feels like money is more important, building brand new prisons instead of putting more money into schools. And I always want to, I don't understand that. And that's another when I die and get to heaven, because I don't understand it. I don't understand how we can think that is okay in our state, but we're struggling to get children educated, to get them career and college ready.
Things that as an educator, one of the things that we always taught, how can a child learn if they're hungry?
Right.
Like, or if they're hurting. And so we always wanted to make sure that our school was a safe place and a happy place. And you can pretty much see on that child's face if they weren't being fed, if something was wrong, and if they acted out. And some of those signs and symptoms did play in not having enough food, not having enough sleep, and parents working late at night. So those are some telltale signs. Well, I want you to give to our listeners the information. How can they report abuse, where can they call? Is there a 1-800 hotline number that they can call if they see any type of behaviors that's going on that they deem to be child abuse or child neglect?
Well, I always say you can call our office. I mean, we are mandatory reporters, and so we will report it to law enforcement, DHR. But our number, we're local here in Montgomery County, is 334-262-1220. And anybody of the 5 people on our staff would be able to point you in the direction, because we do get calls from outside of Montgomery, and to point you to that local Department of Human Resources. If a child is in imminent danger, if you suspect that a child is, in danger right then, the best thing is to call 911. Also, if, the example that I gave where you haven't seen the little boys out, if you yourself are maybe afraid to go next door because you know that maybe I've heard some yelling, I don't really want, I don't want to put myself in danger, the local law enforcement will go out and do a welfare check. If you just call and say, listen, I haven't seen these kids out and I've heard a lot of yelling, and, they'll go and do a welfare check. I know that teachers during the pandemic, when a child was not showing up virtually and maybe they were one of those children that were high risk, teachers were then calling and touching base with those families to make sure that the child was okay.
Now, I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing that you're really sticking with the calling that is on your life, from just the work that you do and also the way that you're serving in the Montgomery Public School System. If you would share some ways that we can get involved, besides calling and reporting, what are some ways that we can get involved to really support what you're doing?
Well, with Child Protect, I will tell you, if you go to our website, childprotect.org, and we are on the Facebook. We are kind of, right now, our social media, Laurel Till left us to go to United Way, which we're very happy. It's a great move for her. But what she did, we are realizing was a lot, because I'm not real good on the Facebook and social media. But we have a list of items that you
I
can
love when
help
you
us.
say the Facebook.
Yeah, everybody laughs at that too. So, but we have a list of things that we need. What we have done now, we don't have any toys in the lobby, so we ask for crayons. The small box, eight of crayons in the box, and a color book. Because we give that to the child when they come in, so they can color while they're there, and then they take that with them. So we always need paper towels and Kleenex and office supplies like copy paper primarily, and things that you use in an office that does cost us money. Snacks, individual snacks, macaroni and cheese, because 3 kids came in the other day and they had not eaten. And so I fixed macaroni and cheese and peanut butter crackers, and that's what they had for lunch, because just what you said, we can't talk to them about abuse if they've come in hungry and they haven't eaten since lunch the day before. So those are ways that you can help us. Right now we're limiting the number of people in the building. We're still doing Zoom counseling, but we're doing the forensic interviews in-house, but we're really trying to limit it to 1 guardian, just to continue our safety measures. But the color books, and the older kids like those that are real intricate, the color books that I'm talking about, like grown-ups do.
Highlights.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes. And so, in journals, the blank journals that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I mean, you can get 3 in a pack, and those are always good to help us. And those are tools that we can use for counseling. So, and then with the schools, I think that there's going to continue to be opportunities for partnerships, for churches to adopt schools, for businesses to adopt schools. We've got to have some type of really community engagement. If we keep talking about that schools are the foundation, the schools are the future, the kids, we have got to put our money where our mouth is, because and a lot of it is just tutoring those children and providing just someone to listen to them.
I hear exactly what you're saying and where you're speaking. I'm thinking there's probably 2 to 3 churches almost on every corner.
Yes, very close. And you're exactly right that there's more opportunities there. I know one of our city councilmen wants to bring a basketball league to Montgomery to keep these, boys active and I think that's great. I think anything to provide, and we do read more about juvenile boys in the community. I've always had a heart for boys. I feel like that, they're tough on the outside, but they really need their mamas, and Shay, what I'm talking about. So,
Yes.
they're the heart. And so I think that's, those are the ones that probably need, and this is my opinion, need the most intervention, because they're pressured a lot more. They've got a lot of stuff going on out there, and just trying to keep them out of trouble. Anything that we can do.
Yes, yes, you are definitely right. We definitely need to make sure that we are supporting you and supporting our children, and like you said, putting our money where our mouth is. I said it right.
I know I had to try to question, was I saying that right?
Yes. So make sure that you go out and you follow Child Protect on social media. Drop some crayons by, some journals by, paper towels, any type of food that they could, not perishable, non-perishable items that they can fix for the youth when they come in. Support, give some money when you can. When they get back to running 100%, go volunteer your services. Jana, I just want to thank you for the service that you're doing. If you could believe it, we're almost done.
What?
Yes.
I told you I only had one gift. It was talking about Child Protect and the kids. So.
Yeah, we love it. We love it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much again for being come on and being a part of Hearts and Hills and all of your services, like to the board and to our children. For
Well,
over
thank
20
you.
years.
It's my honor. It is
20 years.
absolutely an honor and a privilege, and I just appreciate it so much. This has meant a lot to me, so I thank y'all.
Yes, we appreciate you. And shout out to Keisha Favor. She's watching on
Thank you,
social
Keisha.
media.
Thank
She
you,
said Child Protect Children's Advocacy Center. So make sure you follow them and make sure you're engaged with the work that they're doing. Now, the thing about our youth is, I'm agreeing with Jana. We say that they're the future. We have to act like they're the future. We have to protect them because a lot of us can testify, or we can share our voices to the abuse that we received when we were younger, if truth is told. So we don't want other youth to go through those things. We don't want to continue to perpetuate these behaviors. We have to make some changes. So go support the school system. Call Jana if you have some problems. Let her know. She got your back.
Yes, yes.
Can you give us that number one more time before we end?
It is 262-1220. And like I said, anybody on staff can answer any questions and get you in touch with me. We're there 24/7, so don't ever feel like, and no question is dumb. No, when it comes to a child, I had someone call today and said, I'm thinking this child has mosquito bites, but I really think it may be cigarette burns. And I said, you don't need to prove it. You just suspect it's cigarette burns. You need to report it. So, that was a call we got today, just a random call. And so we always have to err on the side of the child.
Wow. Always err on the side of the child. Thank you so much, Jana, for being here tonight with Child Protect and also with the MPS School Board. Keep doing great work. Shout out to Yolanda and shout out to WVAS. You have been listening to Hearts and Hills. We thank you for sharing with us tonight. We'll be back same time, same place. Definitely not the same way. And remember, whatever you do, do it with all your heart. And ladies, make sure you step on the enemy's neck with your inches and tell him he cannot have you, he cannot take you, nor can he live in your space. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week.
And shout out, thank you, Shay.